Hello and a warm welcome to the next video, and this is from module N3 and it's the first of two, and in this one we're going to look at equivalent fractions and how we can cancel fractions to lowest terms. Now what you're going to need for this video is the little homework booklet. It should have module N3 homework exercise on the front. Good, so if you've got that, open it up and we'll start by looking at equivalent fractions. Now, when we talk of equivalent fractions, what do we think first? Yes, pizzas. So there's two lovely pizzas, both exactly the same. Now, if I chop the one on the left into halves, and if I chop the one on the right into quarters, and then I'm going to start eating them. Now, on the left-hand side, I'm going to eat a half of the pizza. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to eat 2 quarters. But look, they're both the same amount of pizza, so therefore the same fraction. So what we can say is that the half is equivalent to 2 quarters. Now we can't always do pizzas, can we? So we've got to think about numbers and fractions. So let's have a little look at what's happened mathematically. Now the one on the top of the half, what we did, we multiplied that by 2 to turn it into 2. And the bottom, we've multiplied that by 2 as well to turn the 2 into 4. So we've multiplied the top and the bottom by the same number. And if you do that, multiply the top and bottom of a fraction by the same number, you'll end up with equivalent fractions. And so we say a half and 2 quarters are equivalent fractions. They've got different numbers in them, but they represent the same amount or same quantity. Well, let's have a look at 2/3. Now what if we take that top number and multiply it by 5? Well, that'll give us 10. And as long as we do the same to the bottom, multiply by 5 to give us 15, we've got equivalent fractions. So 2/3 and 10/15 are equivalent fractions. They represent the same amount. Let's try one more, 5/9. And if we multiply the top by 3, we get 15. And if we do the same to the bottom, i.e. multiply by 3, we get 27, and those two fractions represent the same amount. There's different numbers, but they are the same amount, and so they are called equivalent fractions. And now let's go back to our 2 quarters of the pizza. We don't always have to multiply. We could divide. Now if we divide the top number by 2, we get 1, and if we divide the bottom number by 2, we get 2. So we get 2 quarters and a half, and we know those are equivalent because we showed that with our little pizza illustration. So if you divide the top and bottom of a fraction by the same number, you'll end up with equivalent fractions. Let's have a quick look at one example then. 15/25. Let's divide the top by 5, and as long as we do the same to the bottom, we're going to end up with 2 fractions with different numbers but representing the same quantity. So they are equivalent fractions. So what we can say is then that with fractions, if you multiply or divide the top and bottom of a fraction by the same number, you'll end up with equivalent fractions. Okay, now there's an exercise in your workbook then. We're going to do the first 2 together, and then you can have a go at the rest. So let's see what's happened here. It says fill in the missing number in these equivalent fractions. So what have we done to that 3 to turn it into 9? Well, we've multiplied it by 3. So for equivalent fractions, we must do the same to the bottom. So we times the 4 by 3, and we get 9/12. Okay, so 3 quarters and 9/12 are equivalent fractions. Let's have a look at number 2. Now what have we done to that 8 to make it into 4? We've divided by 2. So we must do the same to the bottom. So 10 divided by 2 is 4/5. So what I want you to do now is have a go from question 3 onwards. There is question 3. You just got to fill in the missing number in each question. So press pause, do the exercise, and then when you want the answers, press play. Okay, so how do you get on? Now in this one, number 3, we've multiplied the bottom by 5, so we've got to do the same to the top, 5/10. Question 4, what have we done? We've multiplied the bottom by 2. We do the same to the top. 5 times 2 is 10. Question 5. Now this time we've divided. We divided the top by 4. Same to the bottom. 1/3. Question 6. we've divided the bottom by 7. So we've got to do the same to the top. 28 divided by 7 is 4. So 4/5 and 28 35ths. The same quantity, they are equivalent fractions. Now on this one, we've multiplied the bottom by 4. So we do the same to the top. 6 4s, 24. And then number 8. To change that 8 into a 4, we have divided by 2. Do the same to the bottom. And we get 4/5. Now a trick one here, we got the same fraction, but we've done something to the bottom this time rather than the top. We divided the bottom by 2, do the same to the top. And the last one, number 10, what have we done to that 7? Times it by 9 to get 63. So the same to the bottom, 72. So there we go. Now what we can do, now we can create equivalent fractions. And that's the first part of any study of fractions. Now, when we've been dividing so far, we've been writing the fraction using smaller numbers. So, for instance, if we take this fraction, 16/24, divide top and bottom by 2, we end up with 8/12. The numbers are smaller, but we could carry on making them smaller again. We can do this a few times. 8 and 12 are even, so we can divide them both by 2, and that will give us 4/6. And then we can divide by 2 again, so it'll give us 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we've got 4 fractions there. They all represent the same quantity, and they are equivalent fractions. There they are. But 2/3 is a special one. It's got the smallest numbers we can get for that fraction. We can't make those any smaller. There is no number that goes into 2 and 3. Well, where's it gone? Come back. And so we say that 2/3 is the fraction in its lowest terms. So now we're going to look at how we write a fraction in lowest terms. So let's say we had 12/36. They're both even, so we can certainly divide them both by 2. Now you might have spotted a higher number that goes into both of them, and we'll look at that in a second. So that gives us 6/18. Now they're both even, so we can divide top and bottom by 2. Again, you might have noticed a higher number we could divide by, but it's not a problem. 3/9. And 3 goes into 3 and 9. So we can divide top and bottom by 3, and that will give us 1/3. Now we can't go any further, so we say that 1/3 is the fraction in its lowest terms. Now you might have spotted how to do that a little bit quicker. You might have actually divided by 2 to start, perhaps, and then notice that 6 goes into both of them. So we could go a little bit quicker to get to 1/3. Or you might have actually noticed that 12 goes into 12 and 36. Now it doesn't matter if you use lots of smaller numbers or go straight for 12 in this case, you'll end up with the same fraction in the lowest terms. There we go. So there we have 12/36 in its lowest terms is 1/3. So we've got a little exercise here. What I want you to do is write all of these fractions in their lowest terms. You might have to do a couple of divisions, or you might spot some large numbers, but have a go at it. And there's the first one. So what you need to do now is press pause, write down the answers in your book, and then when you want to mark them, press play. Okay, how do you get on? Right, the first one, 8/10. Well, they're both even. Divide top and bottom by 2, 4/5. Number 2, 10/25. Well, 5 goes into 10 and 25, so that will reduce to 2/5 in its lowest terms. Now 8/16, there's lots of numbers going to 8 and 16. You might have spotted straight away that 8 goes into it, but it doesn't matter. You might have even divided by 2. So some of these green fractions you might have had, but they're not in the lowest terms. 8/16 in its lowest terms is a half. Okay, so you might have gone through those green ones to get to a half, or you might have gone straight to a half. But as long as you get to a half, then that's good, and that's right. Number 4, 6/30. So you might have gone to 3/15, but the one we want to get down to is 1/5. Question 5, 24/36. Now you might have used 12/18, 6/9, but the one we want to get down to is 2/3. Number 6, 28/42, or is it 28/42? Well, you might have divided by 2 and then divided by 7, or you might have straight away divided by 14, but 2/3 is what we're looking for there. Question 7, 32 over 48. There's quite a few here. Look at all these. But the one we want, what is it? 2/3. Nearly there. Number 8. There's a tricky one. What goes into that? Well, 5 will go into them. But it'll go further because 7 goes into 7 and 21. So remember, it's not a race. We haven't got to get down to the lowest terms in one go. It's quite okay to go through 7/21 and end up with 1/3. And lastly, number 9. Well, this has got a few again. And hopefully we end up with 3/4. So there we go. That's the end of the first video. So if there's anything you didn't get, just go back over it and make sure before you go on to the second video that you can get fractions in their lowest terms. And I'll speak to you now in the second video. Bye for now.